What happens when an unknown engineer claims that a truck can float? The command laughs, orders fall silent, and the entire army freezes when his mistake suddenly begins to save hundreds of soldiers from the deepest mud of war. It started with a sandwich. Not a blueprint, not a battle, not a press release. Just a cold, soggy sandwich in a dented metal tin, passed from one soldier to another while crouched behind a makeshift barricade on some nameless Pacific island. Corporal Melvin Harvey watched the exchange from the edge of the dock, his clipboard soaked from the rain. It was November 1942, and somewhere behind him, brass were arguing about tank deployment ratios. But what stuck with him was the soldier's face, grime-caked, lips cracked, eyes hollow. That sandwich wasn't lunch. It was survival. And they almost didn't get it because the damn truck couldn't swim. That was the moment he made the mistake of caring. Melvin was 41, technically a corporal, practically an engineer, and mentally done playing by the book. He'd spent the first half of the war buried in the Detroit assembly line trenches. Blueprints, redesigns, idiot-proofing carburetors for drivers who still called wrenches that twisty thing. He wasn't a hero. He wasn't even standard issue, but he was smart. Too smart, according to Captain Brooks, who once told him during a production meeting, "You're not paid to think, Harvey. You're paid to rivet what we already thought." Still, Melvin had seen the reports. Supplies weren't making it from the ship to the shore. Soldiers were drowning trying to drag crates through surf and mud. Amphibious operations were a logistical joke, and not the funny kind. The Army had trucks, and the Navy had boats. But nobody had a damn clue what to do in the space between. So Melvin did what any good wartime bureaucrat feared most. He built something new. They called it the Duck. WWII officially. Unofficially, it was the ugliest thing anyone had ever driven. 6 wheels, a boat hull, a propeller, and enough rivets to make a submarine nervous. A floating truck. A ridiculous rust-colored lumbering bathtub on wheels. "It looks like a mistake," someone muttered during the first demo. "It is a mistake," someone else replied. They laughed. They always laughed. The first time it touched water, it sank 6 inches more than expected. No one said anything. Not yet. But when the rear axle slipped off a wet ramp and jammed sideways, the crowd of observers, mostly uniformed cynics and cigar-chomping procurement officers, erupted in muffled chuckles. Melvin stood ankle-deep in lake water, jaw tight, watching his prototype cough and sputter like a dying mule. "You call that a military vehicle?" Colonel Maston's voice cut through the drizzle like a slap. Melvin didn't answer. Maston was a career man. Old school, dress uniform, every morning type. He respected tanks, artillery, tradition, not duct-taped science experiments built by guys in oil-stained coveralls. "I've seen carnival rides that look more reliable," Maston sneered, hands behind his back, boots spotless on the dry part of the dock. Melvin stayed silent, eyes on the Duck, heart crawling through mud. It got worse. At Fort Ord, during a rain-heavy field test, the Duck stalled mid-river. A lieutenant from logistics slipped climbing aboard and nearly cracked his skull on the side panel. The papers called it a laughable misallocation of war funds. One even ran a cartoon, a duck in an army helmet sinking into a swamp while generals threw dollar bills after it. Headquarters responded the way bureaucracy always does, with paperwork, project suspended, funding frozen, prototype impounded. Melvin got a quiet memo. "Return to standard engineering duties. Discontinue DUKW development until further notice." Translation: You had your shot. Sit down. But Melvin wasn't done. Not because he was a rebel or brave or trying to prove anyone wrong. He just couldn't stop thinking about that damn sandwich. How many more wouldn't get delivered? How many men would die because someone in Washington decided wheels and water shouldn't mix? That night, back in the maintenance bay, the second duck was still sitting in pieces. Rusted, stripped for parts, half forgotten. Melvin walked around it once, then again. He ran his hand across the battered side panel, still dented from the river test. "Gonna resurrect the beast," came a voice from the shadows. It was Corporal Jefferson. Motor pool, quiet guy, smoked a lot. Knew his way around an engine better than most officers knew a map. "You still got your hands?" Melvin asked. Jefferson chuckled, flicked his cigarette, and rolled up his sleeves. They worked at night. No memos, no reports. Just torque wrenches, soldering irons, and spite. Piece by piece, they rewired the bilge pump, reinforced the seals, adjusted the center of gravity. One morning, an officer from procurement walked in, spotted the progress, and demanded to know why this monstrosity is still in the building. Melvin didn't flinch. "Just cleaning up," he said, "before we toss it." They didn't toss it. By the end of the week, it was floating again. Smoother, tighter, steadier. But no one cared. Until two Marines wandered into the bay, fresh from Guadalcanal. They stared at the dock like it was a spaceship. "You built this?" one of them asked, wide-eyed. "Could have used something like this last month. We lost half our ammo crates in the surf." Melvin didn't say a word. He just handed them a wrench. That's how it started. Not with medals or approval, with muttered jokes, rolled eyes, and the slow grind of stubborn hands refusing to let a good idea die. And somewhere out there, a hungry soldier still waited for that sandwich. We're just getting started, and trust me, it only gets more intense from here. Stick around to see what happens when the resistance gets louder, and the stakes get real. It wasn't the bolts or the budget that nearly killed the duck. It was a meeting. A beige room, a long, polished table, 10 men in creased uniforms and starched collars. The kind of place where ideas didn't just die. They were strangled in silence, one form at a time. Melvin Harvey stood at the far end, still in grease-stained fatigues, hands rough from a week of wrench work. He shouldn't have been there. Technically, no one below major rank even spoke in this room, especially not guys who still smelled like motor oil. But here he was, and the duck was the reason. Colonel Maston tapped a pen against the folder in front of him. "This is the engineer you mentioned?" he asked without looking up. Captain Brooks, now suddenly Melvin's biggest fan after hearing rumors the Navy might be interested, nodded. "Yes, sir. Harvey, civilian transfer, brought over last year." "Does he have clearance to be here?" "Temporarily, only for this discussion." A discussion, that's what they called it. Melvin took a breath. His heart didn't race. It thudded, like it was carrying its own wrench. He opened the leather folder he'd brought with him. Inside, photos, maps, diagrams, a list of every failed supply drop that could have been avoided with the duck. He placed one photo on the table, a black and white shot of soldiers waist-deep in surf, dragging crates wrapped in plastic, rifles slung over their backs. A crate had cracked open, cans of food bobbed like dead fish. "I'm not here to sell you a toy," Melvin began. "This thing can deliver 5,000 pounds of ammo, fuel, or food, straight from ship to shore, no dock, no crane, no beach ramp. It can drive on roads and float on water. We've tested the newer unit across 3 environments and—" Maston raised a hand. Silence fell like a trapdoor. "I've read your file, Harvey. Impressive work ethic. Bright. But here's the issue. This isn't engineering school, it's war. And in war, we don't gamble on fantasies built in garages." Melvin didn't blink. "With respect, sir, we've gambled lives at every time we offload supplies by hand." Another officer, General Lampert, Logistics Division, leaned forward. "And you think this is the answer? A bathtub on wheels?" Muffled chuckles. Not many, but enough to remind Melvin who he was in this room. A mechanic speaking to emperors. He reached into the folder again, placed down a typed list. "These are all the operations delayed in the past 6 months due to terrain and lack of proper transport. Every single one cost manpower, some worse." Brooks cleared his throat. "Sir, the Navy's Transport Command has expressed curiosity." "They expressed curiosity about flying jeeps last week," Maston snapped. "We don't change doctrine because someone's curious." The meeting dragged, not forward, sideways. Melvin argued. They deflected. Every question about function turned into one about optics. "Doesn't look intimidating enough. What will reporters say when they see it on the beach? Will it hold up to mortar fire?" "It's not supposed to be a front-line vehicle," Melvin said, keeping his voice calm. "It's transport. It's supposed to get the right tools to the right people, without losing 3 men and a mule in the process." Lampert flipped a page. "What's the top speed again?" 50 on land, 5.5 knots in water." "Too slow," Maston said. "For what?" Melvin shot back. Pause, long enough to feel dangerous. Maston's voice lowered. "Son, this army runs on proven systems. Tanks, trucks, ships. You're not going to win a war reinventing the wheel, or the boat." He closed the file with a sharp snap. "We're done here." Back in the hallway, Melvin leaned against the cold concrete wall and exhaled for the first time in an hour. Brooks joined him, arms crossed. "You held your ground. And it didn't matter. Maybe not today, but you made them listen." Melvin didn't reply. Not because he was defeated, because his brain was already turning again. They hadn't said no outright. They'd just buried it under 1,000 bureaucratic shrugs. That's how systems worked. They didn't shoot you down. They made you irrelevant. The next day, an order came down. The Duck project was to be shelved indefinitely. Not cancelled, not terminated. Shelved. A perfect military word, meant nothing, meant everything. 2 days later, a memo circulated through internal channels warning engineers not to pursue amphibious modifications outside approved schematics. Melvin's name wasn't on it, but everyone knew who it was for. He was reassigned. Temporary transfer to a supply depot in Kentucky. Away from the coast. Away from water. The depot was a different world. No tests. No prototypes. Just crates, clipboards, and heat. Melvin spent 12-hour days logging tire shipments and explaining to junior officers why fuel drums shouldn't be stacked like toy blocks. But at night, in a corner of the motor pool, he sketched. No computers. Just a blunt pencil and a grease-spotted notepad. He redrew the hull, refigured the intake. He wrote letters. To the Navy, to civilian contractors, to a friend at a press agency he hadn't seen in 4 years. Nothing stuck. Yet. One night, while checking inventory, he found 2 Marines arguing over which truck could handle a mud trail. One pointed at a half-loaded Jeep, the other just laughed. "If we had that weird duck truck I heard about, we wouldn't even need to argue." Melvin froze. "You've heard of it?" he asked. "Yeah, some guys saw it up at Pendleton. Said it looked like something out of a kid's drawing, but it worked." "You're sure? Why?" "No reason," Melvin muttered, already walking back to the barracks. Something had leaked. A whisper, a rumor, and for the first time in weeks he didn't feel insane. But just as the gears started turning again, trouble found him. A formal inquiry landed on his bunk the next morning. The envelope was cream-colored, stiff, official. Inside, accusations of unauthorized engineering activity and unregulated correspondence with external agencies. Maston's signature at the bottom. They called him into a disciplinary meeting. 3 officers, no windows, no chairs for comfort. Captain Langston, Internal Affairs, read the file like a grocery list. "You've been advised several times to focus on assigned duties. Yet records show you've sent 5 unauthorized letters to military departments and outside vendors. I wasn't sharing classified information. You weren't authorized, period." Another officer leaned in. "You're a corporal. Why are you trying to run the army?" "I'm not," Melvin said. "I'm trying to fix what's broken." Langston closed the file. "There's a thin line between innovation and insubordination, Harvey. You're dancing on it." That night, Melvin found his toolbox was gone. So was his sketchbook. Just disappeared. In its place, a folded note. "Let it go before it buries you." No name, just ink. But the handwriting was familiar. "Brooks, we're standing right at the edge. Something's about to snap, and when it does, nothing will be the same again. Don't miss what comes next." If you also believe that sometimes it is funny ideas that change the course of history, support this story. Like it, subscribe to the channel, and write in the comments. Would you believe in a floating truck if you saw it for the first time? The duck should have been dead by now, buried under memos, boxed up in storage, forgotten like a bad invention from a war no one wanted to fight this way. And yet, it kept floating, not on water, but through whispers. It was the whisper that landed Melvin Harvey in New Jersey, in a muddy shipping yard he hadn't asked for. One day he was logging tires in Kentucky. Next day, orders came from a logistics reassignment. No explanation, just a train ticket, a cot, and a clipboard. "Don't unpack," someone muttered when he arrived. "No one stays long." The place was chaos. Longshoremen, Navy grunts, Army quartermasters, all bumping into each other like a war-themed comedy sketch. Crates marked for Africa were sitting next to winter gear bound for Alaska. A tugboat captain screamed at a colonel. Someone dropped a crate of medical supplies into the harbor and didn't even flinch. And in the middle of it all, a man in a civilian coat waving a pencil like it was a sword. "You, Harvey?" he barked. Melvin squinted. "Depends who's asking." "Name's Kruger. I run this circus. You're the guy who built the bath truck, right?" Melvin's jaw tightened. "Do KW?" Kruger laughed. "Yeah, that's the one. Well, guess what? You just became my new headache." Turns out the duck wasn't as dead as the army thought. Or maybe it was dead, and someone was digging it up for one last look. Kruger walked Melvin down to Pier 6. Tarp pulled back. There it was, battered, rusted, stripped of markings, but unmistakably his. "She was sitting in a yard near Philly," Kruger said. "Somebody from Navy requisitions flagged it as experimental transport. Thought it might be useful. Everyone else laughed." Melvin stepped closer, ran his fingers along the edge of the bow, his design, his welds, his heartbeat. "She runs?" he asked. "Barely. We patched the radiator and rewired the starter, but she needs love. That your department now." Melvin didn't smile. Not yet. But something moved in his chest. Not hope. Not yet. Just friction, motion, the return of fight. The next 3 days were pure fire. Kruger gave him a crew, unofficial, unpaid overtime, mostly kids from the motor pool with more grit than training. There was Sanchez, a diesel tech who used to race motorcycles before the draft. Taylor, a wiry mechanic who never stopped chewing gum. And Lou, who didn't talk much but welded like his life depended on it. No uniforms, no permission slips. Just tools, sweat, and stubbornness. "Why's this thing even worth fixing?" Taylor asked on day 2, wiping grease on his sleeve. Melvin didn't look up. Because nobody thinks it is. They stripped it down, bolt by bolt, rebuilt the seals, replaced the pump with a Navy surplus model from a failed landing craft, reworked the axles, raised the exhaust. Everything they weren't allowed to do before, they did now. They worked in shifts, ate standing up, slept in turns. Word got around. By the end of the week, sailors were coming by just to stare. Some took pictures. One asked if it could carry a crate of torpedoes. Melvin just nodded. "Depends how fast you want it delivered." Then the storm hit. Not the weather. Washington. A liaison officer arrived. Tall, polished, smelled like cologne and policy. "I'm here on behalf of Military Procurement Command," he said to Kruger. "There's concern you're violating engineering suspension orders." Kruger didn't blink. "We're just restoring junk. Clean-up duty. Nothing more." The officer turned to Melvin. "You've been previously warned. Your conduct is bordering on subversive." Melvin wiped his hands on a rag. "Subversive's a big word for fixing a broken thing. You don't have clearance to be working on experimental units. Then why ship it here?" The man didn't answer. He left a warning, not a citation. But the message was clear. One more step, and we bury you for real. That night Melvin found a new note tucked under his tools. "They're watching. Be smart." Same handwriting, Brooks again, but it was too late to stop. 2 days later, a cargo ship limped into port. Storm battered, 1 engine dead. On board, a wounded Marine squad fresh off a botched drop in the Caribbean. Supplies ruined. Communication gear fried. Kruger looked at Melvin. "Can your thing run?" Melvin didn't hesitate. "Yes." No orders. No time. They wheeled the duck out at dawn. It rumbled like a beast shaking off sleep. Painted gray. No markings. Just steel, noise, and nerves. They loaded it with crates, food, ammo, dry gear, and pointed it toward the flooded road that led to the temporary barracks. Jeeps had already gotten stuck. Half tracks were rerouted. Melvin climbed into the cab. Taylor sat shotgun, radio in hand. Kruger stood on the dock, arms crossed. "You sure about this?" "No." "Good enough." They rolled straight into the flood. Water rose to the headlights. The crowd of Marines and dock workers held their breath. A truck this heavy shouldn't have floated, should have sunk like a safe. But it didn't. The propeller kicked in, water churned, the duck moved forward, slow, steady, defiant. They cheered, no speech, no medals, just shouting, the sound of doubt cracking. The duck hit land again like it owned the place. Tires spinning, body dripping, cargo intact. By nightfall, photos of the run were circulating through command channels. By morning, so were rumors. The duck wasn't dead. It was proven. Everything just changed. But not everyone's happy about it. In the next chapter, power starts shifting. And the people who laughed are about to get loud. You don't want to miss what comes next. Melvin Harvey didn't even make it to lunch. By 9:43 a.m., 3 black sedans pulled up to the yard. Civilian plates. Washington-style impatience. The kind of cars that parked wherever they wanted and made the people in charge look suddenly unsure of what in charge meant. Melvin Harvey, the man said, stepping out first. Slick hair, smooth tie, the kind of handshake that felt like a threat. I'm here, Melvin replied, wiping grease on his coveralls, already tired. Name's Aldridge, Office of Strategic Development. Never heard of it. You weren't supposed to. Aldridge didn't blink. Let's talk. The conference room wasn't a conference room, just a break room with the clock removed and blinds shut tight. We saw the photos, Aldridge started, and the reports, from the field, from Kruger, even one from a Navy mechanic who said, and I quote, "This thing could land gear on the moon if we needed it to." Melvin crossed his arms. So now people upstairs are asking questions. Big ones. He pulled out a folder, another, then a third. One was stamped. Classified. Logistics Integration, Phase B. Another. Draft. Amphibious Mobility Strategy. The last one wasn't even labeled. You're telling me this was shelved, Melvin said, eyes narrowed. It was. But now it's not? Aldridge leaned in. Now it's interesting. And when something gets interesting, people want credit. That's when it hit him. They weren't here to help. They were here to claim. The duck had survived mockery, neglect, and sabotage. But now it faced something worse. Success in the wrong hands. By the end of the meeting, Melvin had been offered a promotion, a rank upgrade, and a transfer, not to the front, not to a lab, to D.C. Help us steer the rollout, Aldridge said. You get a desk, a staff, a platform. And the project? Melvin asked. Oh, we'll take it from here. He declined, flat out. No apologies. That's a mistake, Aldridge said, gathering the folders. No, it's a decision. Don't confuse stubbornness with integrity. I won't if you don't confuse ambition with leadership. The door closed. No handshake this time. Within 48 hours, things started moving. Fast, and not in a good way. First, Kruger was reassigned. No warning, no farewell, just gone. Second, the duck was ordered for transport to a secure facility. Melvin tried to intercept the paperwork. No one would admit who signed it. No one knew where it was going. The crew, Taylor, Sanchez, Lou, were all put on separate shifts, scattered across different depots. Then came the headline. New amphibious transport, unveiled by Strategic Command. A military breakthrough. No mention of Melvin, no photo of the team, no Kruger, just suits. And a name. Not DUKW, not Duck. They called it the Model 76 Aqualog, like it was a blender. He sat in the barracks that night, silent, staring at the newspaper. You all right? Sanchez asked. No. You gonna fight it? Melvin nodded slowly, but not with memos this time. He wrote one letter, then another, then 10 more, not to the Pentagon, to the people who mattered, to dock crews who'd seen it run, to Marines who'd ridden it, to warehouse leads who knew what it could do, to the press photographer who'd snapped that first muddy test. Each one said the same thing. Tell the truth, because no one else will. 2 weeks later, the response started trickling in. Not from D.C., from everywhere else. A Marine column in the South Pacific sent a note. We asked for ducks. They sent us aqualogs. They broke in 3 days. A Navy commander in Guam wrote, Your design floated. Theirs sinks. What now? And then, quietly, the press circled back. The same photographer, name was Elsner, showed up with a notebook, no camera this time. "They're trying to scrub your name from the story," he said, "but people are pushing back." "Why are you helping?" Elsner shrugged. "Because I watched you pull 3 crates of gear through hurricane swells when no one else could. You didn't smile for the camera. You just did the job." Melvin leaned forward. "Then let's finish the job." They started printing the truth. Not big papers, those were bought, but trade publications, naval journals, veteran forums, supply chain newsletters. Each one told the story. A civilian engineer, sidelined, fought to fix a gap in military logistics and got erased when it worked. And guess what? People listened. Because when gear fails in the field, soldiers don't care about titles, they care about tools that work. The calls started again. Not from Aldridge this time, from people above him. Someone from Joint Command asked for a meeting. Quiet, off the record. "I don't want the politics," Melvin told them. "I want the project back." They hesitated. "Name your terms," they said. Melvin didn't ask for money. He didn't ask for recognition. He asked for his team, Sanchez, Taylor, Liu, and full oversight. And a new name on the record, DUKW, nothing else. But nothing comes free, and nothing in war stays clean. In the next chapter, the duck gets put to its real test, and not everyone walks away dry. You've come this far. You need to see what happens when reality hits harder than any policy ever could. The south coast of Sicily wasn't a battlefield yet. Not officially. Not until the first wheels hit sand and the bullets started asking questions. But for Melvin Harvey, it became a war zone the moment his boots touched the ramp. He wasn't supposed to be there. Engineers didn't get field orders, especially not middle-aged mechanics with grease under their nails. But when the brass approved the DUKW for live deployment, and someone high up demanded real eyes on the rollout, Melvin didn't hesitate. He grabbed his tools, his team, and booked himself onto the first Liberty ship, crossing into Operation Husky. The bay was chaos. Troop carriers bobbing like toys, commanders shouting into radios, crates stacked so high they blocked the sun, and DUKWs, dozens of them, lined up like a flock of ducks that had wandered into the wrong ocean. Some of them were his, some weren't. And that's what worried him. He found Taylor first. The kid was elbow deep in an engine, sleeves rolled, jaw clenched. "This one's not ours," he said without looking up. "Steering columns welded like a lawn chair. Whoever made this didn't read the specs." Melvin nodded. "Aqualog model?" "Yeah, stamped 6 weeks ago. Probably slapped together by someone who's never seen saltwater." Sanchez chimed in from under another unit. "Pump's too shallow. Hull trim is wrong. One bad wave and it'll turn sideways." Lou just grunted. That was his way of saying he's right. And then the rain came. Because of course it did. Heavy. Relentless. The kind of downpour that turned beachheads into soup bowls. The first wave of DUKWs rolled out just after dusk. By dawn, half were stuck. Some had flooded, others had snapped their axles, trying to pull too much weight across terrain no truck was meant to touch. The officers blamed the weather, the crews blamed improper use. Melvin blamed the system. Again, he marched straight into the forward logistics tent. Didn't knock, didn't wait, just stepped in like he still had something left to lose. "You're sending the wrong units," he said. "Excuse me," replied the major in charge, looking up from a wet clipboard. "These are civilian knockoffs in military paint. I've got real ducks, field-tested, sitting untouched at the rear of the convoy. You're sending props into combat." The Major smirked. "They meet weight specs. They've got tires and floats. That's all we needed." Melvin stepped forward. "They've got corners that'll catch on landing ramps, pumps that'll jam with 2 inches of seaweed, battery insulation that's a joke, and no onboard drainage. I wasn't told any of that. You weren't asked to know any of that. Silence. Tight. Ugly. Then, you want to make this your problem, Corporal Harvey? Fine. Fix it." So he did. For 72 hours straight, Melvin and his crew ran triage on every DUKW in their sector. Rewiring, resealing, reinforcing anything that looked like it would betray a soldier mid-operation. He chewed out welders. He rerouted battery cables with his bare hands. He fell asleep once, standing up against the tire of a unit that had just barely survived a 12-mile push through riverbank mud. And still, it wasn't enough. Because on day 4, a column went missing. 3 DUKWs, 9 men, 2 tons of medical supplies. Vanished somewhere between shoreline drop and inland rendezvous. The reports were vague. Got caught in the storm. Map mistake. Still searching. But Melvin knew better. He gathered what was left of his team and drove straight out, into the storm trail, against orders with 2 real ducks and an extra crate of fuel. What he found broke him. They weren't dead. Not yet. But they were done. All 3 units had flipped. Not sunk, but capsized, on a slope the aqua logs had no business climbing. The soldiers had been stranded for 11 hours. One had a broken wrist. Another was delirious from dehydration. The radios were fried. The tires had spun until they carved deep graves into the mud. And the cargo? Gone. Washed out. Swallowed. The look in those soldiers' eyes when Melvin's duck pulled up, real, steady, loud, said everything. Not thank you. Not relief. Just one question. Why didn't they send this one first? Back at base, Melvin didn't report it through channels. He reported it through volume. He burst into the command tent, threw the broken aqualog tire onto the floor, and pointed at the rusted hub. "This is what we're giving them. This right here." The colonel looked up. "I thought this was already resolved." "No. What you resolved was who gets credit. You never fixed the gear. You're out of line. I'm in the mud, sir, and it's deeper than your clipboard can measure. They didn't arrest him. They didn't promote him. They just went quiet. And a day later, a new order hit the board. Effective immediately. All Model 76 units suspended pending evaluation. All DUKW original spec units prioritized for amphibious transport ops. No apology, no press release. Just quiet correction. The kind that shows up after enough lives almost get lost. That night, Melvin sat alone by the dock. Rain still drizzled, his boots still soaked, his hands still shook. Taylor sat beside him. "You gonna sleep?" "No." "Wanna talk?" "No." "Wanna know what people are saying?" Melvin looked at him. "They're calling it the duck that bit back. You've followed this story through every failure, every lie, and every muddy mile. But the last chapter still remains. And it's not just about vindication. It's about what this war really values, and who gets remembered for what they build. Stick around. You need to see how this ends. It wasn't Normandy. It wasn't a grand speech or a medal ceremony or some final glorious charge. The duck made history on a cold gray Tuesday in late 1944, somewhere off the Belgian coast, carrying socks. Yes, socks. 12 crates of them. Wool, olive drab, standard issue. Enough to keep a battalion's feet warm for 1 week in a winter that was trying to kill every soldier it touched. And that's where it belonged, in the middle of the real war, doing what the big machines couldn't, finishing the jobs that generals never saw on their maps. Melvin Harvey stood knee-deep in freezing water, clipboard soaked, eyes locked on the battered DUKW, rolling off the LST ramp like it had done it 100 times before. Because it had. "You're telling me this thing's made 47 runs?" the British logistics officer asked beside him, voice flat with disbelief. 48, after this one, Melvin replied, tightening the strap on his helmet. It still wasn't armored, still wasn't pretty, still looked like someone welded a garbage can to a tractor. But it worked. Again and again and again. And now it was everywhere. They never admitted he was right. They didn't have to. By the end of 44, over 20,000 DUKWs had been produced. Most bore no names, no dedications, no flashy decals. But every one of them carried something essential. Ammo, medkits, blankets, boots, radios, fuel, stretchers, bread, field stoves, letters from home. They rolled into Anzio when the beaches collapsed. They crossed the Rhine when the bridges failed. They navigated the flooded back roads of France where no tank could tread. And in every photo, somewhere behind the chaos, there it was. The floating truck they once laughed at. Back in the States, it took longer. Recognition doesn't move as fast as bullets. It creeps, resists, looks for ways to rewrite itself. A military museum in Maryland requested a DUKW for public display. The one they received had a replacement hull and no serial number. Melvin flew out anyway, quietly, no uniform, no speech. He stood behind the velvet rope and stared at what they'd turned it into, a display piece. The plaque read, "Amphibious Cargo Carrier, used extensively in WWII, designer unknown." He didn't correct it. He didn't need to. Sanchez opened a garage in Detroit after the war. Taylor became a mechanic for a trucking company in Kansas. Lou went quiet. Moved to Oregon, built boats for lake rangers. They stayed in touch. Not often. But when they did, it was like time hadn't moved an inch. "Still think we should have painted flames on it," Taylor joked once in a postcard. "Would have scared off at least 3 colonels." As for Melvin, he went back to engineering. Civilian side, kept his hands dirty, his name off the headlines, and his principles sharper than ever. He never chased legacy, never filed for credit. But every time someone tried to tell him what couldn't be done, he'd smile and say, "Once I made a truck that floats." In 1965, a group of college students found an old DUKW rusting in a scrapyard outside Pittsburgh. They bought it for $300, fixed it up, and drove it across the Mississippi. The photos made the local paper. Melvin clipped the article, put it in a folder. On the back, in neat pencil, he wrote, "Still not sinking." And that's how the Duck won. Not by crashing through the front pages or blowing things up, but by showing up, again and again, in the places that were too messy, too wet, too complicated for everything else. It didn't need armor, it didn't need applause, it just needed to work. Because sometimes history isn't made by the loudest machine. Sometimes it's the one that refuses to go under, no matter how deep the mud gets. This story is done, but if it stuck with you, if it made you think twice about what failure really looks like, let us know. Subscribe for more stories like this. Tell us in the comments, what's one invention you believe in, even if nobody else does?